Okay, are we ready? All right. Say hello, all you high thinkers and folks that I hope are thinking in general. It's been a minute since our last video, but I'm Sid High and this is Penny. And so I guess the reason it's been a while since I did a video, I had to go back and reread these 3 books, and I wanted to do some videos on Edward Bernays, and here's Pepper coming up to see us also. And so 3 books: Crystallizing Public Opinion, 1923 was when that was written. Then Propaganda, The Public Mind in the Making, 1928. And then this one is the Edward Bernays Reader. And basically what this is, it's like newspaper articles and op-eds and things like that, with excerpts also from these other 2 books. So I probably will cover a little extra of that. This one's also called From Propaganda to the Engineering of Consent. Engineering of consent is a big deal. And so I guess before I get too carried away here, I have to say these last videos that I've done and going back and rereading these books and highlighting what I feel like were the parts that jumped out at me and then making notes on all of that, in a way makes me nauseous. It's just like when you read these books and you start seeing what's going on in the world today that doesn't make sense, and just how strange it all is. Well, to me, a lot of the answers are in these books because it's manipulation. So I'm going to just jump in. I've made a list here of some quotes from, I'm just going to go over this book in this video. This is Crystallizing Public Opinion, and then get into the other 2. So let's just jump right in here. So Crystallizing Public Opinion, page 16. The empirical art of politics was not based on fact-based appeals to reason. Instead, it consists largely in the creation of opinion by the deliberate exploitation of subconscious, non-rational inference. So, not based on facts, but the creation of opinion. And that's what this book is going to get into really heavy, is how to create opinions in the masses. Page 17, herd instinct. The unceasing need to gain the approval and camaraderie of the social group. The individual is more sensitive to the voice of the herd than to any other influence. It can inhibit or stimulate his thought and conduct. It is the source of his moral codes, of the sanctions of his ethics and philosophies. It can endow him with energy, courage, and endurance, and can as easily take these away. So basically what we're going to get into here is group think, and looking at the masses as an entity and how it's different than how an individual thinks and how it can be manipulated. Again, that is the big thing here, is how to manipulate the masses so that the individual, even though they might disagree, tend to have to go along because everybody else is, and you're part of the herd. Okay, so then on page 18, the idea that the American people were incapable of self-rule. For democracy to work, the machinery of the public mind needed to be understood and managed by an educated elite. All right, I didn't repeat this at the beginning of this video, but Edward Bernays was the nephew of Sigmund Freud. So another thing I just saw on Edward Bernays, they call him an American psychoanalyst, but really he's considered to be the father of propaganda. So basically we're starting to get in here with this statement that goes along to me with psychology and psychiatry, but it's saying you have to be educated to be able to do this? Well, and it does take finances and planning and all sorts of other stuff. But basically, the elite, to be able to rule, need to be able to manipulate the masses without the masses knowing that they did it and without knowing who's doing it. We're going to get more into that here in a little bit. All right, on page 22, and I highlighted this one, at the end of the day, the council's intellectual arsenal has one primary purpose: the manufacture of news. The Public Relations Council must not only supply news, he must create news. Wow. Does that seem like that's going on like a massive scale? And remember, this was back in 1923 when the big thing was still the newspapers. Radio had come along, TV was just getting started, but really the way to communicate was still slow, even though it was now worldwide with the telegraph and things like that. But it's also going to talk about later how when the communication speed increases, it can exponentially increase the power of propaganda and the speed at which it, again, is disseminated. But the creation of news, wow, that was such a biggie to me that just jumps out at things that are going on today. All right, on page 25, ideally the job of public relations is not simply one of disseminating favorable images and impressions for a client. The goal was far more ambitious than that. Public relations was about fashioning and projecting credible renditions of reality itself. Fashioning and projecting credible renditions of reality itself. That's another thing it's going to get into a little bit more, is not only the creation of news, but changing your reality, making something real even though it's not, because everybody believes it's real. So, another biggie to me right there, but let's keep going, shall we? All right, on page 31, Bernays then sketched a picture of the public relations expert as a member of the intelligent few who advise clients on how to deal with the masses just by applying psychology. As a member of the intellectual elite which guides the destiny of society, the PR professional, Bernays explained, aims his craft at a general public that is essentially and unreflectively reactive. Biggie right there. Working behind the scenes, out of the public view, the public relations expert is an applied social scientist, one educated to employ an understanding of societal, psychological, social psychology, and economics in order to influence and direct public attitudes. This notion was expressed succinctly in Bernays' book, Propaganda, which is what we're going to get to later. The group mind does not think in the strict sense of the word. In place of thought, it has impulses, habits, and emotions. In making up its mind, its first impulse is usually to follow the example of a trusted leader. This is one of the most firmly established principles of mass psychology. Okay, that also goes into the cults and all that sort of thing, which I covered other videos, which was leading up to this kind of stuff. To me, this is just incredible. And also, this is still in the introduction, so this is about the author of, or the person that wrote the introduction of this book, I should say. So that's why he's talking about Bernays that way. And okay, well, let's keep going. On page 51, in case you want to read along, again, this is all in here. I'm not making this stuff up. I'm not doing conspiracy theories. If you want to buy this book, these are the pages that these quotes are on. Few things are more mysterious than the origins of rumors or credence which they manage to obtain. Okay, there are so many things that I highlight in this book, and I had to narrow it down. But mysterious origins of rumors. Well, yeah, because anybody can start one and just say, In fact, that is a propaganda technique. Did you hear that such and such is happening, or that such and such did this and that? I mean, you can start a rumor and you accuse other people of starting it or some random source of doing it. But if it's outrageous enough and relates to people and use the propaganda techniques, you can get the populace to believe red is blue. And, well, going back to the other videos, when you get into brainwashing and mind control, I mean, you can literally, the Manchurian candidate, get somebody that will be totally normal up to a point to where they kick into their goal of assassinating somebody. Anyways, that's not part of this book, but gosh, this just jumps out at me so much that few things are more mysterious than the origins of rumors or the credence which they manage to obtain, because it's just incredible how when you start a rumor, the power that that can have over the group. And that's precisely what this is all about, controlling the group. All right, on page 90, and here's a biggie, and again, this is 1923, prejudice supersedes logic. Intolerance is almost inevitably accompanied by a natural and true inability to comprehend or make allowance for opposite points of view. Wow, is that what politics is these days or not? I mean, it is just like conditioning people to not be able to talk to one another, to create chaos, which is another part of propaganda, which we're going to get into the techniques of it more later on. But it is just trying to be as divisive and chaotic as possible while reinforcing rumors and making news to get this. Basically, you also get the group to basically numb. You're so overwhelmed with all of this that you don't even want to think about it. It's out of your control. And when that happens, you basically turned over all of your control. You might as well be part of a cult, because just like in Scientology or the Moonies, or, well, any of them, really, any of them where they have control over you and you just are so defeated you don't even care anymore. That is the goal of, and I should have said this at the beginning of the video too, I'm going to call it social propaganda and sinister propaganda, because you can, as you'll read in these books, and what Bernays intended with his propaganda campaign and public relations is selling things and getting people to approve of things that they wouldn't normally do in politics, and it gets much more complicated than that. But he also worried about people using it for sinister purposes, so I'm going to call it sinister propaganda. It used to be called white propaganda and black propaganda, especially Ron Hubbard in some of his books was black propaganda all the time. But I prefer social and sinister to get away from that white hat, black hat, old Western kind of thing. So he felt like, and I think we're going to get into it here in one of these books, but he felt like if the public understood how propaganda worked, you could still use it, but people would know, and it wouldn't be as susceptible, the group wouldn't be as susceptible to sinister propaganda. That didn't seem to really turn out so well, but we're going to get to that later. But like I say, this just all pretty much, there's so much information here, overwhelms me. I'm trying to distill it down into the highlights that hopefully a few of you people that watch this video perhaps will read the books and start finding out for themselves, because it really is that important, and I can't believe it's not a part of our education system. Anyways, I'm going to go on to the next one now. On page 118, the crowd mind is by no means limited to the ignorant. Any class may behave and think as a crowd. In fact, it usually does so insofar as its class interests are concerned. Neither is the crowd mind to be found only when there is a physical agglomeration of people. This fact is important to understand. This fact is important to the understanding of the problems of the Public Relations Council, because he must bear in mind always that the readers of advertisements, the recipients of letters, The solitary listener at a radio speech, the reader of the morning newspaper are mysteriously part of the crowd mind. Again, 100 years ago, newspapers and that sort of thing was communication. But now with the internet, this has exponentially increased. This is just like off the charts these days. He was worried about it back then when it was just newspapers and radio. But as we'll see later on in some of his writings today, it is like on steroids. Okay, let's continue. On page 123. Man is not therefore suggestible by fits and starts, not merely in panics and mobs, under hypnosis and so forth, but always, everywhere, and under any circumstances. Okay, think about this one for a minute. He's basically saying, like I covered in the brainwashing and mind control, it's not just when you're down or depressed or trying to solve this problem, because you are susceptible then, and I would argue more susceptible. But as he's pointing out here, everybody, every human being is susceptible to propaganda anytime, anywhere, any place, no matter your education. The only thing that can help with it is education on how propaganda works itself so that you can see it when it's being used on you. And that's actually sums up why I'm doing these videos. If more people understood how propaganda worked, then we wouldn't be as susceptible to it. And we'll say certain news stations, which are false equivalency, some are worse than others. Some are built solely to be propaganda machines. Okay, let's keep going. On page 165, another biggie for me. By the substitution of words for acts, demagogues in every field of society, of social relationships, can take advantage of the public. Let me read that again because I messed that up. Page 165. By the substitution of words for acts, demagogues in every field of social relationship can take advantage of the public. Words for acts. Okay. People that just get up there and keep saying what they're going to do and demonizing other people and all this instead of looking at what they actually get accomplished. If you have the right propaganda machine and you just keep talking about what you're going to do or all of these things or how bad other stuff is, and not so that it distracts actually from what you're actually doing, because if you looked at what was actually going on, the reality, you would know that it was a lie. But with proper techniques in propaganda, you change people's reality so that they don't even believe what you did, you actually did. They just hear what you say, but not believe their lying eyes, as I guess was it Harpo Marx said, or Yoga Berra, or anyway, I digress, but it is high thought, so and maybe you also see why this reading this and doing this basically upsets my stomach. I mean, it just makes me feel sad going over this, but I also feel it's very important. Okay. On page 179, here we go. Since news is the newspaper's backbone, it is obvious that an understanding of what news actually is must be an integral part of the equipment of the Public Relations Council. For the Public Relations Council must not only supply news, they must create news. This function as the creator of news is even more important than his others. So his other functions, which we'll get in more later, but the creation of news. If you can get people to believe something just because it's written down, or stage something to make it look like this is a new popular thing, even though it was all staged, then you can manipulate people in all sorts of ways. But the manufacture of news is just like a red flag on all of this to me. I mean, back to the sinister and the social. I mean, sure, you can do social propaganda and get people to say, quit smoking, that is for the common good or those kind of things. But just as sinister propaganda was used by the tobacco companies to try and get people to smoke more and more and more, by getting doctors, paying doctors to say that, what their favorite brand of cigarette was. Anyway, moving on. Again, just reiterating the other on page 188. He is not merely the purveyor of news, he is more logically the creator of news. So that is really huge. Okay, and on 189, the Council of Public Relations not only knows what news value is, but knowing it, he is in the position to make news happen. He is a creator of events. Okay, just elaborating on those last couple of points I had here. And then the big close of the book on page 203. The future of public opinion is the future of civilization. It is certain that the power of public opinion is constantly increasing and will keep on increasing. Boy, did you get that right. It is equally certain that it is more and more being influenced, changed, stirred by impulses from below. The danger which this development contains for a progressive ennobling of human society and a progressive heightening of human culture is apparent. The duty of the higher strata of society, the cultivated, the learned, the expert, the intellectual, is therefore clear. They must inject moral and spiritual motives into public opinion. Public opinion must become public consciousness or conscience. Okay, well, right there, Edward Bernays feels like any democratic society would have to have a firm grasp on propaganda with the proper morals and ethics in place. Unfortunately, there is no governing body on this, and it is being used in sinister ways to undermine the republic, basically, and it is just, again, on steroids now. So that covers what to me were the highlights of this book, Crystallizing Public Opinion, 1923. In the next video, I'm going to go through the same way and go over propaganda, the public mind in the making. And I dog-eared and highlighted much more than I can get into these videos, and they're already going probably long anyway. But it just, to me, is just amazing that so few people know about Edward Bernays, let alone understanding the propaganda techniques. A lot of times you'll see, well, not just the propaganda techniques, the part about creating the news and things like that. There's all sorts of knowledge about propaganda out there, false equivalencies and all these other things, straw man, gaslighting, all these things. But really, to understand why those things work, you need to read these books, because there is so much more in here than what I've been able to cover in this video. So again, my hope is that at least somebody will see this video and start reading on this and see what I'm talking about for themselves, make their own opinions of it, and hopefully forward this video on to other people so that more people will have at least a knowledge of what's going on with propaganda, or at least some idea, and hopefully spark interest to get more people educated on propaganda. So that's it for this version of my high thoughts. I appreciate you sticking with me. I know it's not clickbait. It's not what most people are watching on internet. But again, it's my high thoughts. And I hope you liked it. And if you want to subscribe and buy any merch, that would also help. And that's it for this time. I hope you all have a groovy day and aren't too depressed by what I'm telling you from these books. But I will leave you on a high note. pun intended. The more you understand this, the better off all society is. So let's get busy and start learning about propaganda so that everyone knows it. Okay. Thanks again. Have a great day. Penny says bye. Pepper's down there somewhere. And we'll see you next time. Thanks again for watching.